special guests in the show. We just show their amazing highlights, and then they feel really great about themselves. Alan Robinson joining us today. So glad to have you, my friend. It's going to be a whole lot of fun. He's not here to be interviewed. You're an analyst on this show. We can't wait to hear your takes. Somebody who's very close to the league, of course. We have Kimberly Martin here as well, and we've got a lot to get to with her. Also, Phil Yates and Mina Kimes. Guys, there's a lot to get into today, so let's go ahead and get to it. NFL Live wasn't on the air last week, so we need to discuss all of this happening with the Steelers and Dolphins trade. Aaron Rodgers, you can see him working out with the Steelers White House in Malibu. More on that a little bit later, but let's take you back to this Steelers-Dolphins deal. Pittsburgh acquiring Jalen Ramsey, who has the third most pass breakups since 2016. We knew he wasn't going to stay in Miami. Now we know where he goes. Steelers also got Jonnu Smith, who tied a career high with 8 touchdowns last season. Mark Andrews, the only tight end with more. And in return, Minkah Fitzpatrick is now a Dolphin. Since 2016, the only DBs named first-team All-Pro 3 times, Jalen Ramsey and Minkah Fitzpatrick. All right, here's a little more from Ryan Clark, our colleague, connecting with the greats. One Steelers legend and the next. You see Troy Polamalu and Jalen Ramsey on the little FaceTime there. I love that. Good facilitation there by RC. Lets that stuff happen. I've got to get to it. All right, now let's get right to work here with Alan. Does this addition make sense to you from the Steelers side of things specifically?
Definitely. I think it's a great addition. I mean, whenever you can add a player like Jalen Ramsey into the mix, he's very versatile in the secondary. He can play corner, he can play nickel, he can play safety. So for him, being able to be involved in the mix when you're going against T. Higgins and the Jamar Chases of the world, I think being able to have a player who can directly impact guarding them and also blitzing and being able to be a very physical player for them.
Important points here, Laura, but the versatility of Jalen Ramsey, I think, is an important part of this trade. And let's also acknowledge that the Steelers are extremely confident they're landing not just a very good player, but still an elite player, because Jalen Ramsey was paid by Miami on a new deal last September that put him right at the top of the cornerback market. Part of this trade also involves Jalen Ramsey getting a raise from Pittsburgh, Laura, an extra $1.5 million, as reported by Adam Schefter in this deal. So the Steelers feel as though Jalen Ramsey can be a player that, even if on paper they already feel set at perimeter corner with Joey Porter Jr. and also Darius Slay acquired earlier this offseason, Ramsey's versatility is enough that they can just say, we'll figure out on the fly where he best fits for us. If you go back to his days with the Los Angeles Rams, he played a ton of slot corner for them, kind of that big nickel spot as well within that scheme. And if you go all the way back to his days at Florida State in college, Mina, this is a player who has played safety, corner, nickel, you kind of name it. Jalen Ramsey brings a little bit of everything to the table.
Man, he was such a good college prospect. People forget about that sometimes. Reflected, of course, in where he was drafted. Jalen Ramsey is not exactly the same corner he was 5-6 years ago, going back to Jacksonville. But he's still really talented, I think, at a couple of things that Pittsburgh needs. And Alan hit on it when you talked about how physical he is. He is still one of the best tackling corners in the league. He can guard tight ends. He can work the middle of the field. He's tough. And I think when you think about the Steelers and the team that's given the most trouble last year in particular, that's the Baltimore Ravens. And no, he doesn't entirely help them solve the problems in terms of dealing with the Ravens' run game and all the motion. But I do think that physicality will be useful. I do think that ability to handle tight ends is useful against that particular team. So to me, this feels very calculated. You know, when you see these player-for-player trades, you have a team like Pittsburgh. Obviously, they saw something in Ramsey in particular that they wanted. And when you think about their opponents, it makes sense.
Yeah, Mina touched on it. He's not the same guy. But they don't necessarily need him to be the same guy. You don't need Jalen Ramsey to come in and say, okay, be a lockdown corner like you've been in the past. He is physical. He's a ball hawk. But when I covered Steelers so much, and you look at the defense, but behind, it's the depth for me that I like this move. I like adding, it seems like the Steelers are all in. Whether you agree with the moves, you agree with the quarterback, the Steelers as a franchise, they are telling you we are all in, and they're making the moves to prove it. The big question to me is the TJ Watt of it all. I'm not concerned yet. I'll be concerned if we're inching closer to week 1 and he's not on the field. But Aaron Rodgers has said when we get TJ in the fold, things will be good. And I think they know that they're going to have TJ. So you add Jalen Ramsey, you add TJ in the mix. I like this group.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. TJ Watt, I mean, you can't really think about the Steelers late the past few years and not think about it. What do you think about how they should handle the TJ Watt situation? getting that deal done?
You know, I think for them, their defense is based around the front seven, and TJ is a huge part of that, you know. So I don't think you get the benefits of having a player like Jaylen on the back end without a TJ Watt. So I think whenever you can have a guy like that on the field to continue to bring pressure and add to that front seven, I think having Jaylen, you know, would just make things so much better.
Yeah, there's no doubt he is the heart and soul of that team in so many ways. All right, let's talk about the Jonnu Smith side of this trade. One thing to watch with the Steelers offense, the use of 2 tight ends. Since 2020, Aaron Rodgers has hovered around the top 10 in total dropbacks and completions, but has the 5th most pass touchdowns in 2 tight end formations. The Steelers utilized it last season in their highest rate since 2014, and now they add another tight end in Jonnu Smith. Alan, what do you make of Smith's addition, specifically how it fits in the scheme, what they may want to do with Rodgers?
You know, I think it's a phenomenal addition. Not only with just Aaron Rodgers, but also Arthur Smith, you know. So I think with those two parties really liking to have 2 tight end sets, I think being able to bring him in with Pat Fryer move, I think makes their offense very dynamic. Obviously, they added DK Metcalf as well this offseason. So, again, being able to add somebody who's coming off a Pro Bowl season, who has the familiarity with the Arthur Smith, you know, I think it starts to be able to add some cohesiveness to their offense as they're getting in new additions. You know, it also is some familiar faces.
How about 3 tight ends, Alan? Because I really think this team's going to live in 13 personnel, right? Because all the tight ends fit together. You mentioned Freiermuth. To me, he is more of he can stretch the seam. You can use him vertically. Darnell Washington's basically a 6th offensive lineman, I realize, but he's blocker. And then Jonnu Smith, to Alan's point, he's working underneath. He's getting you yards after the catch. You can elevate the screen game with him. Aaron Rodgers has another outlet if the ball's coming out quickly. I like how these 3 tight ends fit together, and he's absolutely right. Arthur Smith absolutely loves this grouping. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a ton of it in Pittsburgh.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about the Steelers side of this so far, but Kimberly, I'm curious, did the Dolphins get better with this trade last week? Because there's been some people who have wondered about the Dolphins side of things.
Laura, yeah, I'm one of them. You know, I think this is a little bit of a head scratcher because as we talked about with the Jalen Ramsey of it all, talk about the physicality, and that's the type of player that they're moving on from. When I look at the Dolphins, one of the things that we've said year after year is this team just doesn't seem to be physically tough. Not my words. Opponents have said that the same. And so when I look at the Dolphins, I just wonder what the direction is for this team. Even the Darren Waller move, you know, that's a guy who hasn't played in a minute. So I'm not sure what the Dolphins are. Perhaps Field Mina, perhaps you guys have a better read on them, because to me this is a total wait and see, because I'm not sure what Miami is thinking.
Well, Darren Waller did nearly make my Spotify Wrapped list this past year because I'm a big fan of his music, but I too was confused by the addition. You know, here's the thing about this move from the Miami side. I think in a vacuum, the team trades 2 players that weren't likely long for the franchise for a player